and as a sociologist, I'm appointed normally to explain why benevolent people are doing nasty things without being nasty people. So this was one of my appointed tasks within the frames of this project that Dimitar presented. And I had to elaborate the hypothesis, a research hypothesis, as to how this propaganda picture delineated by Susanne, stunningly the same here, resonates with diffuse attitudes, social feelings, stereotypes in society. So let me bother you with a conceptual thing at the beginning. I built a simple framework, comprised of 4 notions: social anxiety, fear management, propaganda effect, and social governmentality. Anxiety understood as troubling but objectless preoccupation, that troubling feeling of uncertainty and unease. And this anxiety is being converted into particular, though mythic, figures of fear. Those figures rest upon and reinforce certain pre-existing and widely shared social feelings of unease. And thus, wrapped up in fear figures, that is objectified, anxiety is a little bit relieved because you can counteract to the fear figure, to the object of the fear. And this transformation of anxiety is actually a transformation into readiness for action, and exactly that I call propaganda effect, the transformation of the diffused anxiety into social governmentality. At the end of the day, however, it turned to be much more difficult because this fear was transformed into something else, namely resentment, resentful social feelings. There were threats widely circulated and communicated in the mode of inevitability, but those threats designed to scare large segments of the public, in the long run fostered a tide of social resentment. So what was the social mechanism behind this rising tide? And moreover, actually, a persistent question that might sound simple continues to trouble me. And I think it's troubling us, probably. How are we to speak with the resentful? Do they want to speak with us? Is a conversation possible? What do we do? So, some examples. Here is an example of how resentment is incited by a celebrity journalist. The Bulgarians feel, no, they know, they are worse off right now than at any other time in their entire 1,300-year history, and as if in agony, displayed that they are happy despite their senility, their demographics, and their immigrated children. Fires, political crisis, state collapse, societal inadequacies are all remedied by the Bulgarians with the heroine of the proud, cheap photo from the beach, as if they were born in Hawaii, and so on and so forth in this style. This was a Bulgarian celebrity journalist. I'll quote from Bulgarians, from Americans, you name it. Here is another example from a recent post interpreting the unrest on American campuses, taken, by the way, from a blog named Call Me Stormy. Trump, this was before the elections, Trump has planned to stop fraud. The deep state has just played their hand. They pushed the riots on the campuses. This is working against Biden and the deep state. The country is coming together where they hate Biden. The deep state pushed this agenda to usher in hate speech laws. This will fail in the end. And let's hear another quote from a post of another website, Free Republic. In November 1968, Richard Nixon defeated Hubert Humphrey in the Electoral College. This was at the time when most Democrats were strongly anti-communist, and being pro-American was considered normal, almost required. Today we have a completely, goes on the post, the publication, we have a completely different landscape. In 2024, Democrats are virtually indistinguishable from communists, and being pro-American is seen as racist. Hence the college protests. They're at their core not just anti-Israel, they're anti-Semitic, they're anti-American, anti-Western, anti-capitalist, anti-police, and of course anti-white. Sadly, and so on and so forth. So the signs of resentment, I stop quoting here, and go to the signs of resentment that are all present in these quotes. And let me trace them one by one. A, the fatalistic attitude, the resentful expectation and imagination of revenge, but revenge coming from external forces. And this expectation is often paired with millenarian myths and hopes, incited by quasi-prophetic voices like the quoted above, which help shape the self-perception of certain groups of people based on a sense of being left behind. B, the feeling that we are a repressed majority, thus turned into a minority, silenced by all those regulations, such as hate speech regulations, that are depicted as silencing the majority. Hate speech regulations make us speechless. C, the conviction that hate speech regulations were deliberately designed to harm and humiliate us. D, the conversion of impotent revengefulness into a source of moral judgments. We witness a collective emotion of carefully nurturing one's laments and grievances so as to blame the world for them and thus claim the moral superiority of the victim. Thus, resentment is also the transformation of impotence into pleasure, where weakness becomes a source of pride and strength, while strength itself becomes a pitiful vice. And finally, E, there are even signs of gloating that the suppressed and self-censored hate speech will eventually be unleashed. This will fail in the end. This moment marks the enjoyment of resentment. So, the speech that we heard, how these fears got transformed into the speech that, resentment inciting speech that we heard. By the way, the speech that we heard has most of the features of speech activity named parrhesia, with the Greek word parrhesia. It involves the act of speaking out, fearless speech, so to say, bold speech, boldly speaking the truth in an unauthorized, unlicensed manner, as if throwing a stone, speech like a stone in the face of a tyrant. That means that this act of bold speaking is marked, not is constituted by risk-taking. I'm throwing a stone at someone much, incommensurably more strong than me. And I take the risk of my life and with my life, and this is my engagement with the speech. Yes, these quotations, they had the marks of all this, but they lack this risk-taking moment, the courage as a proof of sincerity. So this is actually castrated parrhesia. That is, let us hear this quasi-parrhesiastic speech again indiscriminately, to see certain features of it. I quote, "There are societies of control. Power decides to give out what people want and accordingly governs them through the basic procedure of stressing and reassuring." This is about the contemporary power. It stresses, then reassures, stresses again and reassures. We've seen this now very recently. They stressed us with Ukraine. And we were quickly reassured because they stressed us with Israel. Before that, it was COVID, end of quote. And another quote. This was Bulgarian, and the next is American. "You can't find that virus out in the wild. It apparently has all the earmarks of being engineered. But this is something that they do. This is not like science fiction. These are the same people that want war. These are the same people that are encouraging censorship. These are the same people that try to silence dissent. That's all totalitarian shit, and just because it's done for trans kids or for Black Lives Matter or for any social cause that you think is like undeniably worthy, it's still the same thing at the end of the day. And they enact control over the people that they never had before, and that's what they did during COVID, end of quote. Are Joe Rogan, this was by the way Joe Rogan, and his ilk doing this because they are bad or they are bought? Let me say, first of all, theirs is a strategy of a search for recognition, and this is before being bad or being bold. It is precisely through parrhesia that public recognition is in fact sought, when the only way to be heard is to say something outspoken. The parrhesiastic gesture, though, has been castrated. It is no longer bold speech in the face of the tyrant, but has become instrumental in the pursuit for recognition and authority. These parrhesiaste play out as, I'll quote Gassan Hatch here, alternative intellectuals who mock the academics. This mockery is meant to serve as a source for claiming recognition, if not superiority, as alternative academics, as the academics of the people, whose knowledge is not clouded by curricula, exams, theories, and diplomas. Rogan and his ilk, people with the parrhesiastic gesture, claim to know better, just because they have not worked long and hard, but cast the truth like a stone. Through this very gesture, they create the feeling and the image of injustice. The very positions of academic people are unjust. Positioning in general is an injustice. And this is the source of their claim to truth. And their claim to truth is in fact a war against reality. And they are key social actors in the process of transforming fear into resentment, a transformation of the negative emotion, the feeling of being left behind, into pleasure, the pleasure of powerlessness. If we adopt this way of thinking, we will avoid the deceptively optimistic path of trying to explain resentful sentiments and political choices with the economic transformations wrought by globalization and neoliberalism. So the social dramaturgy of turning fear into resentment lies in the interplay between parrhesia as a resource and a repertoire for seeking recognition on the one hand, and precarity as a prolonged, often constant state of lacking control over one's own condition on the other. But this relation blurs the line between actual victimhood, actually experienced painful events, actually suffered humiliations on the one hand, and victimization as a narcissistic fantasy that we have been unfairly humiliated by those who think of themselves as our betters. And it is, I think, vitally important to distinguish this harmful blurring as an effect of the painful search for recognition in the parrhesiastic transformation of one's own precariousness, and as a political technology, technological strategy of channeling precarity into resentment. This is what I plan to do further. Thank you.